But it was really me being struck by the fact that I was drinking so much sparkling water and I wasn't being sponsored by one of the big brands. I was really curious once I started to understand that no one ever in the world had ever launched a good non-alcoholic wine. So I set out to decide whether I could be the first. It's a lot more complex than winemaking in the sense that you're making a good wine and then you're de-alcoholizing it. And I would argue that not all great wines should be de-alcoholizing.
Where do you see the alcohol-free wine industry in 3 to 5 years?
Fortunately or unfortunately, depending which way you look at it and toss the coin, I think there'll be a consolidation of brands in the sense that many of those that are launching for a hypothetical quick buck unfortunately won't survive. I can understand if I was on the other foot, I'd want my secret sauce on that.
Welcome to Non-Alcoholic Wine Celebrities, a 30-minute B2B podcast hosted by me, Vanessa de Souza Lage. I'm the founder of vinos.com, VIN00s.com. In each episode, I sit down with a professional who's shaping the non-alcoholic wine market. So this show is designed specifically for industry professionals, bringing you sharp insights and strategies from the leaders driving one of the fastest growing categories in beverages. So thank you so much for being here and taking the time to listen. If you're enjoying the show, please follow us on your favorite listening app or subscribe on YouTube. Every listen and every follow helps us keep this podcast alive and bring on high quality guests. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. Happy listening. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Non-Alcoholic Wine Celebrities by Vinos. I am interviewing today Amanda Thomson, who is the CEO and founder of B Corp certified Thomson & Scott. She has created the brand Noughty, Noughty, in her own words, the world's first premium non-alcoholic wine portfolio. Amanda is of South Asian heritage and she's won many, many awards. I'm going to pick on two. I want to just highlight two. The Business Insider's coolest people in food and drink. The Drinks Business Entrepreneur of the Year Award 2025. Congratulations. In her former life, she was an arts broadcaster at the BBC and she studied at Le Cordon Bleu School in Paris. She now sells to the world's coolest bars, restaurants and hotels, including the Mandarin Oriental, the Ritz-Carlton and Raffles. Wow, congratulations. Amazing. So launching ourselves straight into the questions that I have for you. No chit chat on this podcast. We're short of time and I want to hear everything about the ins and outs of your business. So firstly, why did you decide that it was the right time to launch a non-alcoholic wine brand? And what opportunity did you see in the market? Because it's back in 2016, right? That you launched.
19 actually. We
2019.
Launched 40, yes. Yeah, it was really a culmination of first world problems, being at wine events and being in the industry and not being a huge drinker, which is actually way more common than I think people think it is. Even amongst wine drinkers, often wine drinkers who are in the industry, you can't really keep drinking hard every night and be at the top of your game. So what I find quite fascinating is now I'm on the other side, the non-alcoholic side. So many people share those stories. But it was really me being struck by the fact that I was drinking so much sparkling water and I wasn't being sponsored by one of the big brands. And also, much as I love sparkling water, it wasn't very celebratory. And you still get that sort of, oh, are you not drinking comment? And so I was really curious once I started to understand that no one ever in the world had ever launched a good non-alcoholic wine. And that isn't me being pejorative about previous existing brands. It's just that the legacy brands weren't really squarely targeted on the qualitative side at sort of fussy wine drinkers like me. So I set out to decide whether I could be the first.
Very good. And that was then a very complex process, I imagine. Please tell us about what it took to scale this idea.
Initially, it was extremely complex, like you said. My historical relationship with fine wine was I worked with champagne. So I would find the great makers out there, and for me, they were the artists, and I would see who could make wine with me to my recipe, like a collaboration. And when I discovered that they really weren't the great non-alcoholic winemakers out there that I was romanticizing, I was starting from a very different position. And I think to some degree, while my fine wine training was absolutely crucial and pertinent to me being where I am now, I believe, with that sort of R&D, a sort of specific piece, there was a lot of ripping up the rule book and finding out how I could start again and find someone to make that wine with. So yeah, it was extremely complex, in fact.
And so where did you find this winemaker
Well,
who had the guts to
yeah,
jump into this?
it wasn't actually that simple. And actually, what I did find was a company in Germany who had really got this very successful original patent for dealcoholization. As I understand it, the patent's since been lost, but they still keep their system very private. And so, irrespective of patent, they still, are, I would argue, to some degree, the artists at this process. So I found somebody and a company who were doing that well, and so that was where the journey started, as to whether that process, being one thing, was enough then to see whether I could make wine to my recipe there. And then on the other side, I also ended up wanting to find a still winemaker, because actually, if you really get into nerd wine territory, and anyone who's studied fine wine will know, when you do formal tastings, bubbles and mouthfeel are one tick in the box that wine people expect from their wine. And you could argue it's easier, it's not easy, it's easier to make a sparkling non-alcoholic wine that has a relationship with wine than it is to make a still. So there were all of these sort of ideas and philosophies that I was having to really deal with.
Okay, complex indeed. But so now you're making wine in Germany. You're making wine in South Africa,
South
in
Africa,
Spain.
not yet in Spain. There's some different makers I'm talking to in Europe and in California, and yeah. So for me, my brand exists with great winemakers and great dealcoholization processes, and it's a lot more complex than winemaking, in the sense that you're making a good wine and then you're dealcoholizing it. And I would argue that not all great wines should be dealcoholized. So the kind of philosophy that if I take any of my favorite great fine wines and dealcoholize them, that they will automatically be brilliant, actually, unfortunately, doesn't stand up. For example, I'm a huge Burgundy Pinot Noir red fan, and actually, anyone who knows Pinot Noir and Burgundy knows it's a very difficult grape and very delicate to actually make good Burgundy with. And of course, you've got quite a thin grape that's very fine and elegant and refined, and then you dealcoholize it, and I would argue that you don't necessarily get what you want out of it. I know some people are trying. So there is so much history and understanding with the grapes and wine, and yet then you're going off in so many different directions when it comes to non-alcoholic wine. So for me, I do believe it was key that I understood fine winemaking and had a strong relationship with fine wine. But equally, one has to be open-minded and innovative. And I think, like all the best businesses in any industry, for me, you look back to the artistry and the history, and then you see where the innovation opportunities are. So that was, I guess, how my brain was wired regardless. But it did take quite a big leap of faith, actually, as someone who really romanticized great winemakers as artists.
I bet. But in the last few years, you've seen a lot of innovation, correct? In the process.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. I mean, I have and I haven't. I've seen innovation in the sense that everybody's doing it now or thinking about doing it. Is everybody doing it better? Not necessarily. So I think the problem we have now in 2025 is that brands like mine and others who were quite early and quality led have made such a noise about it that everybody thinks there's a bigger opportunity than there is, and then the industry needs to catch up, the purchasing needs to catch up, and I would argue everybody should focus much harder on the liquid instead of just putting out another marketing-led bottle of non-alcoholic wine without any point of difference and without any improvement. So I think in a way the category is becoming a victim of its own success in terms of the media noise. And I would suggest everyone should double down on innovation in liquid and improving the quality.
The quality first. Very good. So in terms of, you were one of the first and you grew this amazing brand, which is recognized worldwide. What does your team look like? What are the members of your team? How does it look internally?
Well, actually, I've had a bigger team than I have now in the past, and we weren't necessarily more successful. And I think a lot of founders, any industry, will tell you the same, that actually it's not necessarily headcount, it's execution. And for me, I love working with people at the top of their game who are thought leaders. And so that takes some time to assemble. You're not going to really build that team overnight. I stop myself when I say I'm lucky enough, because I always tell other founders you make your own luck to a large degree. But yeah, so I'm lucky enough in that I've made my own luck to a large degree, to qualify, that now I have some really great people in my team. And it's quite complex because we work across the US is our biggest market, UK, and then Asia, Europe, and different markets to a smaller extent. So our hub is essentially UK, and then we've got another hub in California, although New York on the East Coast is another big market of ours.
Hi, this is Vanessa. Just a quick interlude to tell you a little bit more about Vinos. We're a media publishing platform, and we welcome anyone and everyone who is a professional in the non-alcoholic wine market to talk to us. If you wanted to be interviewed on this podcast, if you wanted to advertise on this podcast, or be in our newsletter, if your winery rank higher on our website, if you want to collaborate on our social media, there's plenty of opportunities to partner with us. And there is a media pack at the bottom of our website, to the very bottom to the left. Just click media pack and get in touch with us. Or you can email us info@vinos.com. Vinos, that's written VIN00S.com, and we'll be happy to talk to you, even if you just want a general chat. Cheers.
It's quite complex the way my team work, and I've built it up quite specifically, and I haven't necessarily done it in the conventional way, and I would argue that's paying off for me now. So we don't have a huge headcount. We put our profits into marketing, and we treat every single bottle as special. I remember back in the day when I was a journalist, and in the old days, I used to always realize that free stuff wasn't valued properly. And I think the drinks business to some degree has done a shockingly bad job of just giving free stuff out the whole time. And it's just not ethical, sustainable. It's just also on a human level, it doesn't value it necessarily. And I remember that philosophy that LVMH is a lot of the bigger fashion houses. I remember learning that they didn't even give free stuff to celebrities in that kind of macro way when it came to really special high end, the Birkin bag, whatever it is. And I just think in the modern world, it's really important to value what you do, to be ethical, to be sustainable. So from the get-go, we didn't kind of gift bomb, sponsor, free stuff, money, free stock. I get literally probably 10 emails a day asking for sponsorship. And now we ask people to explain what they mean by sponsorship, because usually in the drinks business, sponsorship means free stuff and then possibly money. But either way, that's money, because your revenue is your bottles in the wine business. So we've been quite thoughtful from the get-go about that piece, and every bottle of Noughty is very special to me, and actually, we gift bottles if it's part of a conversation, not just kind of randomly. And I think other drinks brands could do with learning that, because unfortunately at the moment in 2025, when the cash burn model has not shown itself to be sustainable for a lot of brands privately, when I'm on all my founder WhatsApp groups, you see businesses, who were burning cash, they're spending more money than they're bringing in, essentially, giving more bottles of money away than they've actually earned. um, unsurprisingly not being successful and sadly often going into the ground. I mean, the world is littered with drinks brands that have made a really big name for themselves and crashed and burnt. And I think from the get-go, when we've had that focus on sustainability, that's a really important part of the brand build.
Hmm. So in fact, that leads me into what is your marketing mix? What are the channels where do you what have the best results? Where have they come from?
Storytelling, and liquid on lips, to use a beverage drinks business expression. I can talk the talk as much as I like, and until somebody tastes naughty, so it's that combination of storytelling and people tasting to believe. And actually, some of my best clients, I would argue, were the most cynical to start with. I love a cynic. I mean, I've got naughty running through my blood now. But there's nothing more exciting to me as a founder when someone kind of says, I can't believe it's any good, and I'll be like, well, you be the judge, and it's a lovely moment, to take someone from extremely awfully low expectations to understanding that you've done something really good. That said, that's still problematic from an industry perspective, because if somebody's first experiences with a disappointing or bad, sugar, chemically cheap, depressing non-alcoholic wine, you can easily lose them from the category. So it's a double-edged sword.
For sure, it's a bit. So how did you get into these hotels? How did you manage to get the big names, the Mandarin Oriental, the Ritz Carlton? How did that work? I mean, that's incredible. What an
I
achievement.
mean, there's no secret sauce, and this is what I think often people are disappointed to hear. Brand build,
Hmm.
noise, conversation,
Yep.
sales.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's no. I think I can understand if I was on the other foot, I'd want my secret sauce on that. It's really hard work, which are the unsexy terms.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's fine. I find that quite sexy. Hard work. So now you're sold internationally, obviously, and USA, as you were saying, is your biggest market. How did you manage to break into that market? How did you do it?
America's interesting to
Oh,
me. I think every founder who isn't American romanticizes America, but again, so many brands have really struggled to make it there, and it's destroyed them. So, you've got that seduction piece, because all the big brands that that'll make or break you. It was really going back to that ethical piece of storytelling, tasting, and getting the word out there. And I think what I recognized quite early on about Americans in the wine business, to use a massive sweeping generalization, obviously, because this is, um, generalizations exist for a reason, is that I've grown up studying in the old wine world, so Europe. So I trained in Paris, London wine world, notoriously one of the toughest in the world. I would argue potentially the toughest. And I find them wonderfully unsnobby, relatively speaking. What I love about the American wine world is people aren't afraid to spend a bit of money. They're not afraid to have conversations about wine with their sommelier or server. And they're, I would argue, more open minded than my own fellow French, English, old wine world people. And so, because I'm a Brit and I trained in fine wine, and I've got the pedigree of training under, well, the late Gerard Basset was, the most famous somm in the world at the time. He was my first mentor. So I'd earned my stripes, and I also had worked in the champagne business, selling fine wine in America when I had a champagne brand before I pivoted to non-alc. So I knew that wine industry was an interesting one to me. And I think if you just play a straight bat and you've got something that's quality led, you're open minded, you love a conversation, and you're doing something innovative, you can get that conversation going. And so I was a journalist. I'm married to a publicist. We've always had what the New Yorkers call scrappy marketing budgets. So we don't really spend much money on marketing. And, we like to put the noise out there, which is really to get into the old school media press, which still obviously is still print and online based, but that's the journalists you can't pay, right? Not the
yeah.
good ones, and you certainly can't pay the New York Times journalists. That's well known. And we managed to get into the New York Times pretty early, and they
Wow.
wrote about us. And that was because of hard work, quality led brand building, and getting the word out there. So that wasn't magic. That was getting a bottle at the right time into the journalist's hands and the journalist deciding we were worthy of writing about. So I guess all that goes back to the unsexy hard work, which is funny. The longer I get on this journey, the more I realize it's never what people want to hear, but it's the truth.
No, but I mean, I see you on LinkedIn. You're traveling all over the place, and you're definitely hardworking. I can tell. I've seen you on a TV show recently, not you yourself, but Naughty Bottles. Is that right? An American TV show?
I think
That's
so. We're
incredible.
lucky enough to be featured
Yeah.
in quite a lot of places now. Yes, you're right. It was the other day we were on the Today Show, the breakfast show. That was
I mean,
phenomenal in America.
wow, phenomenal, phenomenal. Congratulations. And in terms of partnerships, what are you looking for? Because this is a B2B podcast, as I was telling you.
Sure. So we work with all
Maybe.
kinds of wonderful people. I mean, we worked recently in America with Athletes Unlimited, which is female athletes who have ownership of the board. It's a phenomenal organization. We work with all kinds. Coravan, we do a lot with Coravan, which is a really important part of the hospitality and fine wine world because they do the wine preservation systems that look after fine wine, but also work beautifully well with Noughty non-alcoholic wine bottles, and that stops any sort of barrier for keeping the bottles fresh over a period of time. Although with Noughty, they're meant to be drunk fast and poured, and but it's still that same concept. All manner of fashion brands, beauty brands. We pop up in all kinds of places actually, and we've got an exciting new launch coming. We've got Noughty Minis. So many people around the world had really asked us to do single serves, like mini champagne bottles. So the minis will be launching across the US, UK, Asia in the next couple of months. So that will be a really big push for us. Yeah, so anybody really who shares our values and where our clients are, if there's an exciting partnership opportunity, we're open to discussing it. Yeah.
Wonderful. So my next question was about growth and innovation. So the mini bottles is definitely on the cards. And then what else are you looking, maybe longer term?
I've got a more complex red coming out, which I could argue we're raising our own game. We've got a really good red already, and actually our red, especially for the price point, is most people say the best non-alcoholic red out there, which is crazy. But that's number one, I think, in a lot of foodie states in America, like Chicago, for example, where you've got a really strong restaurant scene. Chefs and foodies and sommeliers, they love our red. And so I'm working on, I will be launching a slightly more complex red that will be a slightly elevated price point, and that'll hit the market predominantly for hospitality actually later this year, or fall as the Americans say.
And where did the grapes come from?
I'm
Where are you
still
making?
working with my South African partner
Okay.
in that. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. So last question. Thanks so much for your time. Where do you see the alcohol-free wine industry in 3 to 5 years? So not tomorrow, but a little bit midterm. And what role will Naughty play in that future?
Well, we're building on being a household name. So we're perhaps halfway there, maybe. Yeah, roughly. Yeah,
Quarter.
so I want us to be that household name. So that's where we should be by then. And I think, fortunately or unfortunately, depending which way you look at it and toss the coin, I think there'll be a consolidation of brands in the sense that many of those that are launching for a hypothetical quick buck, unfortunately, won't survive. But the quality-led piece will be the winner. So that's where I think we will go, because as somebody who's now privy to data, because of course we had to build up our own data to some extent because there was legacy brand data, but most of those legacy brands weren't drunk by wine people.
Mm-hmm.
So the data piece has been obviously quite new in non-alcoholic wine, and we're tracking beautifully ahead of market. But of course, that market actually, I think a lot of people piling in, it's future facing, huge, but it's not as big as one might think it is at the moment. So it's like there's no quick bucks to be made because there's brands like mine and a few others who are pretty far ahead on that journey. So I would never be piling into this industry to make a quick buck now, personally. I think that, there's a lot of good that those of us who are already doing good things can do and are doing. I think anyone coming in, just to remind them, should really focus on the liquid.
The quality, and it's a serious business. I like that
Yeah.
as an ending point. Thanks so much, Amanda, for this wonderful interview, and all the very best to you and Noughty and the team. Cheers.